Is it a normal relationship difficulty or emotional abuse? Sometimes you can't tell, but if you have a question like that, I'll help answer it on my other podcast, Love and Abuse, over at loveandabuse.com. Life presents the toughest challenges. Every day you are faced with decisions that test your ability to express who you really want to be in this world. We're told to keep saying affirmations and keep thinking positively, but what do you do when that stuff doesn't work? Welcome to the Overwhelmed Brain, where you'll learn to make decisions that are right for you so that you can create the life you want now. Hey, this is Paul Coliani, and I want to help you increase your emotional intelligence, handle toxic situations with grace and ease, and give you the tools to show up as your authentic self. This show consists of my personal opinions and is meant for informational purposes only. What is the price of standing up for yourself? Is it worth standing up for yourself no matter what? No matter what the cost, I'm going to stand here in my integrity and my character. I don't care. It doesn't matter what I lose. It doesn't matter who I tick off. I'm going to stand here because I know I'm right and I'm not budging. What's it worth? I think that's a great question for today's episode. I'm going to talk about someone who wrote to me and had that dilemma and lost important people in her life, and that actually led to missing out on some other important things in their lives as well. So we'll get to that, I think, in the next segment, but let me start off by telling you a little story. I have a couple stories about this, and that is that they're very relevant to what I'm talking about today, which is asking yourself the question, what do you value more? And that's a great question in a moment of contention. When you're in conflict of some sort, you might get angry and you know that it's going to hurt the relationship or your job, or you might lose money. That's a great question to ask. What do I value more? Or what do I value most? In saying something like that or asking yourself something like that, in the moment, what do I value most in this moment? In the moment, you actually might value what you're standing up for. And this is more along the lines of personal, not like social justice or political or anything like that. This is very personal, just something that affects you. Just you. How does it affect you? Or you and someone else. Just something small, some small event that has a lot of consequence to it. For example, my situation back when I was teenage years, I think, I knew a kid and we were skateboarding together, and I just started driving, or I had been driving for a while. I was 17, I think, and he had some tires that would fit my car. Might have been the full wheel with the rim and everything, but he said, I'm willing to sell these tires to you for $20. I thought, 2 tires, $10 each, that sounds great. I'll do it. So I don't know if it was the next day or a few days later, I said, hey, I'm going to buy those tires off of you. And I said, I've got $20, and when do you want to do this? He said, $20? No, they're 40. And I was kind of smug back then, and I said, well, I heard 20, so it's 20. And he said, no, they're 40. I told you 40. And I said, well, I know there were 20, so let's just not worry about it and move on. Boy, that made him angry. He came right up to me and got right in my face, and he said, I said 20. I forget if he said, don't try to twist this or something like that. And I realized how serious he was. I wasn't even sure if he was just trying to change the price at the last moment or he was just joking, but he was serious. And so there I am, standing there with a good friend of mine, and he is ready to punch me, I guess. I don't know, but he was upset. He thought he was being bamboozled, I guess. So I realized in that moment how upset he was. And here I am thinking, but I know I heard 20. And I decided to ask myself this question, maybe not in the exact way, but I asked in a general way, what is more important here? Is my friendship more important than getting a deal on 2 tires? Is it worth it? Am I going to go through this? Am I going to fight back, either verbally or physically, just to stand my ground because I know I'm right? Is it worth it? Is it more valuable than the friendship? And we've been friends for at least a few years, so am I really going to do this? Is it worth it? And I decided, no, it's not worth it. And I backed off and I said, whoa, hey, I'm sorry. I heard 20 and maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I was wrong. And I don't want to do this. I don't want to risk our friendship over this. And I reached down and shook his hand. I said, no, let's not do this. I don't want to fight about this. I don't want to argue about this. Maybe you're right. Maybe I mistook, what I heard. And I don't believe I mistook it. I was pretty confident. I was happy I was getting that deal. And so, there could have been a miscommunication. Maybe he meant 20 per tire. I don't know. But that's what I heard, and that was my belief. And instead of standing up and saying, no, I know what I heard, you're wrong, I'm just going to cancel the deal. I didn't say any of that. I said, wow, I'm so sorry. This was just a misunderstanding. I must have misheard. I took the fall. I decided that it wasn't worth standing up for myself because I would lose the friendship. It wasn't worth it. And so I said, I'll pay you $40. It's still a good deal. I'll pay you $40. And in that moment, he calmed down and and I don't know if he apologized, but we certainly, made up, and it was never brought up again. And most importantly, I didn't hold a grudge. I didn't think from that point forward that he was a liar or a jerk or any of that. I didn't hold a grudge that some people might. I decided in that moment to accept that it was a misunderstanding and also to value the friendship more than anything. And in order to do that, I had to accept that there was no ill will intended. I don't believe he intended to deceive me. He may have said $20 for both, but in his mind he meant 40. I may have misheard. I don't have a recording of it, so it's quite possible my brain distorted it in some way. So who am I to say, I'm 100% right, you're wrong, you're a jerk, I'm leaving? I can't. I can't say that because maybe I am wrong. This is sort of around the time that I decided that I'm going to have a philosophy of I am open to being wrong about anything I feel certain about. I'm open to being wrong about anything that I am 100% sure of. Why would I do that? That doesn't make any sense, because if you're sure, you should stand up for yourself. I teach that. I think if you're sure, you should stand up for yourself. This is who I am, and this is what I believe. And at the same time, I like to look at life as full of possibilities, full of potentialities, full of random events that could certainly take what I believe and throw it out the window because something else is more important. And in that moment, something else was more important. That friendship was more important. And the friendship lasted a few more years, and then we moved away, or I moved away, and I never saw him again. But I didn't hold any grudge, and that was important because I still wanted to be friends. So you got the point. You understand what I'm saying here. What if it was more money? What if it was 20 grand for a car or something? What if we had made a deal and I had already started paying on a car that he was selling me, and I thought I was going to have to pay up to 20 grand, and he said, no, I said 40 grand. Now we have a different situation. Now we have an arrangement that I was not prepared for, and I was putting more money and time into something that I believed was going to be over and less expensive than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be over sooner and not as much money. So I put more energy into it. That's important to me. It was valuable to me. Is that more important than the friendship? Now, that's a good question. Let's just say he said, it's 40 grand. We discussed this. This is how it is, and this is what you've been paying toward. I'd be upset. I'd tell him, hey, look, this is not what we agreed to. This is the amount that I'm paying, and we agreed that I was going to pay for 2 years, and this is it. And he might say, no, we agreed to 4 years. So now that's a different situation, and this is the tricky part. And this is something I'm going to talk about in the next segment with that email. But that's tricky because there's so much more involved, and it's a bigger interruption in your life. It's a bigger thing that happens that needs to be taken care of, and it's going to cost you more. And it might cost you that friendship. It might cost you a lot of money. It might cost you an attorney to get out of the deal, whatever. But it's going to cost you more. So this is the point where you might have to look at the friendship and ask yourself, is it worth keeping this friendship to continue paying this deal where I'm going to feel like I got ripped off, and on and on. So there's a lot of variables in there, but what it comes down to is what you value most. So in that case, if I were to try that on right now and he said that and I was already making payments, I might actually let the friendship go, because that takes a bigger chunk out of my life, not just monetarily, but there's a lot of time involved there too, because now I have to work for that money twice as long as I thought I would have to earn it. And there's just more of me going into that. So that might make me angry. And we're going to talk about anger in the next segment too, because the person who wrote said she was very angry and she used a lot of hurtful words against people she loves because of a deal, because of something that went south. And she stood up for herself, and that caused problems. So that's a great question, is what do you value more, and is it worth losing relationships or your job or whatever you're standing up for? And when we come back, that's what we're going to talk about. Be right back after this. And what's going to happen if you try to be reasonable with somebody in your life and you just can't reach a common middle ground? You can't meet in the middle. What's going to happen? Well, sometimes you leave feeling bad. Sometimes you have these emotions that you don't know what to do with, and you don't know who to talk to, and they're just down there. And what do you do when they're down there if you can't release them, if you can't process them? Well, that's why I appreciate our sponsor, BetterHelp. If you go to betterhelp.com/brain, you're going to get 10% off your first month. They are an online therapy service. They offer video, phone, and even live chat sessions with a therapist so that you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want. I mean, I don't know about you, but there were times in my life that I just felt like I couldn't get past certain negative feelings or emotions or thoughts. And I didn't have the option to go see a therapist once a week or anything like that. But I love what BetterHelp does. I've heard from listener after listener who's used this service that it has been a huge help for them. And I wish this was around when I needed them most, but they are here now. So this is why I'm telling you about them. Because they offer video, phone, and chat sessions, you get to access them much more often than a regular therapist that you might see once a week or even once a month. This is why it's a nice service to have, and they will help you with depression, stress, anxiety, relationship issues, trauma, grief, self-esteem, even LGBT matters, and everything you share is confidential. It's a convenient, professional, and affordable service, and like I said, I hear from people all the time that use this service, and they love it. They dig it, and they're so glad they heard about it. And that's why I'm telling you about it today. They are a service I vetted about a year and a half ago, and you probably heard me talking about them throughout the year, and you're going to hear me talking about them this year as well. I love endorsing this service, and if you need something like this, they are available to you. Go to betterhelp.com. That's 2 words, better, BETTER, and the word help, HELP.com/brain. Get 10% off your first month, and join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/brain. And speaking of mental health, how about a game, a mobile game that you can play anytime? Because, we have our phones everywhere we go. Everywhere I go, I take my phone. And if I'm standing in line at the grocery store or waiting in Georgia for my emissions test, we have to do that in Georgia. But what I end up doing is sitting there thinking, well, what can I do now? I just have to sit here. I suppose I could listen to a podcast, or I could take out my phone. And guess what I have on my phone? Best Fiends. Best Fiends is a casual mobile puzzle game that is very difficult to put down. In fact, as I'm waiting for something, I realize how fast the time goes because I'm just enjoying myself. My mind is engaged. And because I'm enjoying myself, I don't want to put it down. In fact, when I got my girlfriend on this game, I couldn't get it away from her. I said, okay, let's go to bed now. And she goes, okay, well, let me finish this level. And I think that's funny and it's cute. And it's just one more level. one more level. So I'm used to hearing that. But it is certainly a fun game, of course. It is a game that anyone can download and play, whether you have a few minutes or a few hours. It's the perfect puzzle game to lose yourself in because you're having so much fun. They literally have thousands of levels, so you can play as long as you want and never get bored. So I highly encourage you to check out Best Fiends. Download them for free today on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends. Download it, try it out. I think you're going to love it. Welcome back. I started last segment by asking you the question, what is the price of standing up for yourself, and is it worth standing up for yourself no matter what the cost? And I should have given you the story of quitting my job. When I quit my job and I had nothing to go back to, I had no money. This is when I was married. We had no money, and I finally got a job, and I was there for 3 weeks, and I quit because it was affecting me. It was a violation of my boundaries. They were treating me nice, but they were putting me in a position that wasn't advertised. I didn't want to do it, and then suddenly it felt like a prison because I couldn't even speak my mind or ask them questions. They just wanted me to keep my head on the horizon and continue to do the work they wanted me to do, which is, of course, their prerogative. But it suddenly felt like a prison to me. I didn't want to be in this prison, so I quit. And there's a lot more to that story, but the point is that it cost me the only income that both my wife and I had, and it was the result was that we ended up back at the soup kitchen. Again, there's more to that story, but I paid the price of standing up for myself, of standing up for my integrity, and to be okay with the consequences. I chose to be okay. And of course, my wife actually, she encouraged this because she didn't want me to be in this prison. She didn't want me to feel like I was, it's a strong word, emotionally imprisoned. And I'm glad she did because it changed our lives. I was able to quit that job, and it kept me available for another job that came by and actually paid me double and allowed me to travel in the country, and all kinds of stuff came out of that, and we got our lives back on track. All because I stood up for myself. All because I didn't want to follow a path that violated who I felt I was at the deepest level. And, take that as you will. Define that however you want. But there is a point where you can be pushed so far where you will feel violated at a deeper level. And when you get that feeling, then maybe it's time to stand up and face the consequences and accept the results that you get. I'm not saying that you should. I'm not saying that it's a good idea all the time or it's going to work out. But I am saying that you, or at least I, had to live with myself. And the decisions that you make for yourself when you stand up for yourself, those are being evaluated against what you're going to do for the rest of your life. In other words, who are you going to be and how are you going to feel about who you are for the rest of your life? And I knew in that moment that I quit my job of 3 weeks that we absolutely needed. I knew in that moment that I could live with myself because I wasn't putting myself in any emotional harm, any psychological harm. And somebody might say that's stupid. You should provide for your family. You should not worry, but you should be concerned about your wife and providing for her. And I didn't have kids, and that makes things a whole lot different, of course. But I just looked at my circumstances and I talked to my wife about it. And I didn't even bring up the fact that I wanted to quit. I just told her I just felt like a prisoner now. And she said, well, whatever you need to do, I support. And I think I started crying, and I asked, what do you mean? Do you mean that I could just quit and you'd be okay with that? And she goes, as long as you're happy, as long as it takes you out of that feeling of whatever you're going through, the suffering, emotional pain, whatever it is. And that just changed my life, for somebody to support me that strongly. And that's what I did. I got up from my desk after I finished that phone call, and I went to my supervisor and I quit. And like I said, it opened up the path for other opportunities. I mean, sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes you have to open up the path for other opportunities. Otherwise, if I hadn't quit, I might not have been searching for another job, because I thought, well, I'm glad I have this one, so I can't risk it. And to have the time to be able to talk to people on the phone and coordinate things might not have been there. And it could have happened either way. I could have had a job and found another job, or I was in a different mindset when I quit, and so that made me think differently. It helped me go down a different path than I would have if I were still working. But I wanted to mention that history, that part of my life, because that is a great example of choosing to pay the price of standing up for yourself. And fortunately, I had support to pay that price, because she was going to be affected too, my wife. And we made it through. It was a success story. I believe that when you stand up for yourself and your integrity and your character, because you have to live with yourself, it's always a success story at the personal level. You may lose friends, you may lose family, you may lose other things. And that's the kind of stuff that you have to look at and figure out what's more important. What's the bigger picture? What do I need to salvage here? If I knew my wife would be against me quitting, it would not be worth losing my marriage. It would not be worth, or at least losing her happiness or confidence in me, or feeling of security that she has being in a relationship with somebody who can hold down a job. It wouldn't be worth it. I would just bite the bullet, bite my tongue, and continue doing something that I was growing to hate more and more. It was just wearing me down, and it had only been 3 weeks, and I couldn't imagine what 3 months or 3 years would have been like. So I had that support system. But if that wasn't there, if I knew the marriage was in trouble, I wouldn't have done it. I would have made a different decision. So it is helpful to have supportive people. And it is helpful to know what you're going to lose. What are you going to lose if you stand up for yourself? And is it worth losing? Is it worth risking? And this is where I read this email that I received, because it is all about losing something that's important to you when you stand up for yourself. And this is what this person wrote. She said, "Hi, Paul. I listen to The Overwhelmed Brain and hear a lot of wisdom from you. One thing that's tough for me is your belief that standing up and speaking your truth, whether it hurts or destroys a relationship. My husband and I invested in a property with my daughter and her husband. We put money down and paid for a good majority of the investment, with the main portion of that investment against our house. And my daughter and her husband were our partners, but they considered themselves 50% partners, not minority investors. We disagreed on this, but they refused to be wrong about it. When we spoke our truth and stood up for ourselves, they fought back hard. I used horrible, sarcastic words, but only because we were right and we needed out. Our daughter accused us of all kinds of things, and my son-in-law was disrespectful, sarcastic, manipulative, and used psychological warfare. This went on for a couple years. Now things are settled, and we thought all was well. They had a baby, but we have zero contact. It's heartbreaking. They've spoken their truth, and we've spoken ours. So he believes he's always right, and he will not bend. They want us to crawl to them to apologize. Yes, I used emotional abuse when they continued holding us in this deal. I seem to use sarcasm and hurt to make my point with my other child as well, and sometimes my loving, wonderful husband. I'm so mad that I've done that. I'm confused on the difference of speaking my truth and standing up for myself, and emotional abuse. I feel sometimes the more good things my husband and I do, the more our adult children take advantage of us. Overwhelmed and insecure. That was her signature. All right. Thanks for sharing that. That is a very challenging situation when it comes to business and family. That can be very challenging. And let me just say this up front. If anyone needs to hear this, probably not, but if you do, I want to make sure that everyone knows that when you get into a business or financial arrangement with family or friends, even a close acquaintance, always outline the terms of the contract in writing. Always. You're going to be 40% partner, and you're going to owe this amount, and this is our role, and this is your role. If you don't have it in writing, then all it is opinions and emotions. Well, facts too, but some people are going to be wrong about the facts, and some people will have miscommunicated what they really wanted to say, and some people will have heard and misinterpreted things that were supposed to be facts. This is what happens. This is why it's so important to lay things out in a contract, especially when it comes to friends and family. And of course, with strangers, you're going to have a contract. You need to. You absolutely need to, because sometimes there's no trust. But even when there's trust, there's misunderstanding. So I'm not going to put this person down for not making a contract. I'm just kind of use this story as a warning that when you get into any type of financial arrangement or business arrangement with anyone you care about, if you want to continue having a relationship with them, make sure the terms of the contract are clear and written out. I don't think I have to say that to anyone, and I'm not an attorney, so to take that for what it's worth, but come on, that's going to be good advice for anyone. So just in case you haven't done anything like this before, that is important. If you don't have it on paper, it's all opinions and emotions, and sometimes or often distorted facts when things get out of hand. And this has gotten out of hand. This is something that probably could have worked out if things were outlined clearly, but some things were misinterpreted, some things were misspoken, some things maybe were purposefully misinterpreted. I don't know. But when two people walk away from a deal, they're both going to have their own thoughts, ideas, and opinions on it, and they're both going to have their own version of the facts. And that's what seems to have happened here. Now, that said, if there was a clear outline, it's so easy to point someone's aggression or someone's disagreement back to the contract instead of back to yourself. What I mean is it's a lot easier to maintain some sort of relationship when you can say, hey, it's not me, it's the contract. I hope that makes sense, because what you're doing is you're diverting the negative association of you being the bad guy and making the contract the bad guy. Hey, it's not me. This is in the contract, even though you made up the contract with them. But you can look at them and say, let's refer to the contract so we can clear this up. That way you don't have these arguments or disagreements, and maybe there will be disagreements even with a contract, but that's when you might have to get somebody else involved, a mediator or attorney, whatever. And when you do, then it can be cleared up with the contract. This helps keep some semblance of a relationship. And I'm not saying that it will keep the relationship, but at least the contract will have been the one that you can point at and say, no, it's not my fault, it's what the contract says. It keeps the level of animosity, if there is any, away from people and puts it on something in place, the outline, the structure, the contract. So when you have that in place, it keeps you out of the doghouse. Keeps them out of the doghouse too, because you have that in place. So that's probably not going to help this person who wrote to me, because what's done is done. But let's address what she is asking here. The first thing I'd like to address is when you bring in your emotions and your opinions, and they are heavily either aggressive or sarcastic or belittling or intimidating, whatever energy is behind what you're saying to the other person in the agreement, when that happens, things just escalate. This is what happened here. Things escalated. And what she's saying is, I'm confused on the difference of speaking my truth and standing up for myself and emotional abuse. I sometimes feel like the more good things my husband and I do, the more our adult children take advantage of us. So I'd like to point out that when somebody takes advantage of you, that is a boundary issue. That's not necessarily something that you need to be hurtful back with, unless it's necessary, but I don't think it's ever necessary. But when it comes to standing up for yourself, there's a way to do it where you don't have to be hurtful to someone. I actually call it honoring yourself while honoring others. And I like to look at it that way. Whenever I have any type of boundary issue or I feel a violation in any other way, I like to make sure that I am honoring myself while honoring those I care about. Because what is the result? We don't necessarily want to lose the relationship, unless you do. But in my case, I don't want to lose my relationship. So I will stand up for myself in a way that honors me and honors them or respects them because of who they represent in my life. If it's for my brother, my sister, my mom, my dad, well, my dad's not around, but everyone else, if it's for someone in my life that I care about and want to maintain a relationship with, then I'm going to be very careful with my words, and I'm going to say things that honor me while honoring them in the way that tries to maintain the relationship as much as possible. In this case, it's difficult because they both believe they're right, and in many cases that's how it is. But if they both believe they're right, how do you settle this? Without an outline, without something on paper, some sort of contract, the only way to settle it is to butt heads. I mean, that's what happened here. And I'm not saying that is the only way to settle it, but that does seem like there's no other way to go. This is what I believe, and the other person says, this is what I believe. Well, that's not right. This is how it is. No, that's not right. This is how it is. Where do you go from there? That's difficult. And this is the point where the question, what's it worth to stand up for yourself? What's it worth? Is it worth losing this relationship? Because now we're talking about something that I mentioned in the last segment, how much of an investment went into it, how much time, energy, and money, in this case, is going into what they've both invested in. And they are both invested, so they both feel like they have something at stake here. They just don't agree on the amount, or at least the distribution. And if you don't agree on a fundamental fact or point, then it just doesn't go anywhere because you continue disagreeing. So now we ask the question, Is it worth being upset at each other? Because we know as soon as we start talking about this and people are getting angry, that it's going to be hard to find our way back. And so this does take a lot of self-control. This does take a lot of willpower. And it is asking yourself the question, is it worth losing family over this? Because that might be the result. And is it better to be right and make someone upset at you for the rest of your lives? And in this case, this is what seems to have happened. It's like, okay, we finally reached a settling point, but now we can't see our grandson. That's a big loss. However, there is a way out of this, according to what she wrote in her letter. She said that they want us to apologize. Come back crawling on our hands and knees and apologize. And here comes the next question. Is it worth keeping family to grovel? Is it worth doing to be able to keep your family or get your family back? Is choosing to apologize the best path to take, even though you know you're not wrong? This is the question. Is it worth doing it because I want to keep my family? Let's just say that if this happened to me and there was a lot of money involved, and I looked at the fact that I'm not going to be able to see my grandson, is it worth apologizing for? Well, the first place I go is I ask myself a question. Can I be apologetic? Can I feel sorry for anything about this? Can I feel sorry about anything about this? Not just I'm sorry this happened, but can I feel sorry or apologetic about something specific? And the first place I go is yes, I can, because I said a lot of harsh words. I said a lot of hard things that were probably mean. So I don't like being mean. I don't want to be mean. So I can be sorry for that. I'm so sorry I was mean. That was awful. I can feel sorry about that. I can feel apologetic about not being clear up front. Like, I thought I was clear up front, but clearly I'm not, or I wasn't. I wasn't clear at the very beginning of this arrangement, and because I wasn't clear, it was misinterpreted. So, I mean, they may not think it was misinterpreted. They may say, I know exactly what you said. I interpreted it fine. And then you can say, well, then I didn't convey the message clearly enough, because in my mind, I had one set of thoughts, and when it came out, it did not get conveyed well. So I apologize for that. I can be apologetic for that too. And so there are definitely other things that I can apologize about how I showed up, about my role in what happened. And yes, I might have to grovel a little bit. I might have to come crawling back, proverbially speaking. I might have to come crawling back and apologize about those specific things. Now, if they say, well, I want you to admit that you were wrong and you were awful and all that stuff. I want you to admit all of that stuff. This is where I go big picture. The big picture is that I was wrong about many things. You know what? I was wrong about many things. You're right. I'm even going to say that. You were right. You were right that I was wrong about many things. I'm sorry. This is something that I hope never happens again. It got way out of control, and I feel really bad it happened. All of those are true. I'm not apologizing for what I believe they got wrong. I'm not apologizing for their misinterpretation, their misunderstanding. I'm not apologizing for any of that. I'm just apologizing for what I know to be true. And that is a true apology. So the idea is to get the big picture in mind. What do I want to get out of this situation? I want the relationship back. So I'm ready to apologize. That's what I'm going to do. Again, this is me. This is what I would do. I would find truths to apologize for and then apologize for them because I want the big picture. So what's it worth to me to stand up for myself? It's not worth losing family. In this case, to her, it's not worth losing family. I might have a different opinion. Maybe I'll have family someday that this happens. Somebody dies and now we have to contest the will. Somebody contests the will and now we have to figure this out and family's going to get mad at each other. I might just walk away. I might just step back and say, you know what? You guys fight about it. If I get nothing, whatever, at least I still have my family. I don't want to get in the middle of this craziness. I'll just get what I get. I might do that. But what if there's millions involved? What if there's billions involved? What do you do then? I don't know. Is it worth losing family? Would I rather have a lot of money or my sister that I only have one of? Well, I have three. But let's just say that was the case. Oh, she's contesting the will and she doesn't want me to get that. So maybe I will step back. Say, you know what? Just, work it out the way you want. Make whatever fairness you want. I'm a minimalist, though. That may work for me, but it may not work for somebody else. Maybe they need the money because they need the bills paid and they have a lot of stuff going on, and I get it. I get it. And you can have all that, or you can have that family. Maybe you'd see that as a family member not worth keeping, because why would they put you in that situation? I think it's important to reach that place in your mind, that decision, so that you know what decision to make. In this case, she's asking, what is the difference between honoring yourself and emotional abuse? Between standing up for yourself and fighting them or being emotionally harmful to them? The difference is between this is what I need for me and this is what I'm going to do to you. I'm simplifying it, but let's put it that way. Honoring yourself is taking a stand for yourself, doing what you need to do for you. What I need to do for me does not include calling you a jerk, because that's not for me. That's to make you feel bad. But what I need to do for me is say, hey, look, this is how I interpreted things, and this is what I believe. And if the other person says, well, that's wrong, you are wrong, this is how it is, and this is how it's going to be. Do I immediately step into, well, you're a jerk? And of course you'd think that because you aren't smart enough to figure stuff out. This is where name calling and sarcasm and intimidation and bullying and all that other stuff comes in, because we're not really honoring ourselves. We are pushing somebody back or making them feel bad and making ourselves superior, giving ourselves control and power. I know those sound like negative terms, but this is what happens, is that when we feel like we're being backed against a wall, how do we get off that wall? We need some power. We need some control. I need to get my power back. This is what happens, is we feel like we need to push back. And a way to do that is to take someone else's power away. That is one of my definitions of emotional abuse, is when someone takes your power away. So if you feel like your power is being taken away, what do you want to do in return? You want to get your power back, and you want to take their power away. Typically, that's what happens. I want to get my power back, and I want to take yours away. Because if you have power, you're going to, push me down into the ground. But if I have the power, then I can control things. Some people get their power back by pushing back hard and putting someone down and calling them names and being sarcastic. Some people get their power that way. And that is an emotionally abusive way to get your power. Other people say, I know what I heard. I believe I'm right. I have the facts. This is how it is. And I believe this is the path we need to take. Even in the face of disagreement, even in the face of somebody else being abusive toward you. But you're honoring yourself while honoring them. I'm not putting them down in this example. I'm not calling them names in this example, on and on. I'm just honoring myself. This is what I know. This is what I believe to be true. But it escalates, because what ends up happening is the other person disagrees and the other person can become hurtful. And so that's going to start firing off your emotional triggers. And when your emotional triggers are firing off, it feels harder and harder to control yourself. This is why you always come back to the question, what's more important? Is this relationship more important? This relationship is more important than those tires for 20 bucks. It's more important than that, so I'll just give them 40, or I'll walk away from the deal. I would rather keep the relationship. What if it's 20 grand, like I said? What if it's 200 grand for whatever investment you're into it, and is it worth it? Can you walk away from the deal? Can you find a compromise? Can you find a balance? Well, you know what? I'm going to take a 10% loss. Maybe you are 60% and we are 40%. Maybe it's that because I would rather keep family. But then you hold a grudge, right? This is what happens. We hold a grudge when we feel like we've been wronged. If you're holding a grudge, that comes out in destructive ways later. This is where acceptance comes in. I accept that even though this is wrong and they're wrong, I would rather have access to family and rather have access to my grandchild in this case. So I'm just going to accept that's the way it is. And I'll set a rule to never get into a contract or a financial arrangement with them ever again because it doesn't work. And then maybe you can move on, or maybe you can't. And this is sometimes what happens, is that we lose connections because we can't get beyond that. We hold that grudge. So let me wrap this up by really getting clear on the difference between standing up for yourself and honoring yourself and being emotionally abusive or hurtful towards someone else. In this person's case, she asked if it's worth standing up for yourself, even if it destroys or hurts the relationship. I need to clear that up because I don't think I've ever used those words specifically. I said at the risk of losing the relationship, not hurting or destroying the relationship. And there is a difference, because you can stand up for yourself or honor yourself at the risk of losing the relationship. But I don't recommend you stand up or honor yourself at the risk of hurting or destroying the relationship. What happens to the relationship is what happens. But when I speak about at the risk of a relationship, I usually mean talking about hard truths. A hard truth is something that you know to be true, that you know will certainly be impactful to the person that you're speaking the hard truth to. And when you speak that hard truth, they're going to have to make a decision about talking about it and having a civil conversation about it, or choosing to do something else. Maybe they don't like your hard truth. Maybe they don't want that truth to be true. So they don't want to deal with it. Maybe they don't like your truth. So they may hurt or destroy or leave or whatever. But your intention shouldn't be to honor yourself even at the risk of destroying or hurting the relationship. Your intention should be to honor yourself even if it risks the relationship. And I don't even say it that way. I only say it in a way of speaking your truth at the risk of losing the relationship. So honoring yourself, yes, may lose the relationship, but you have to preface it with the question, is it worth the price? Is honoring myself worth the price of risking losing the relationship? And I think that's probably the best way to put it. If honoring yourself loses the relationship, then maybe it's not the best path to take. Maybe you do have to, give some leeway and allow the other person to feel right and maybe be right about certain things. This is where you might want to talk about compromise or balance or reaching middle ground somewhere, meeting in the middle. And you can meet in the middle by coming to certain agreements. What is true for both of us? This is negotiation 101. What is true for both of us? Well, it is true that we got into a financial agreement. Great, we can agree on that. Is it true that we chose to split it 50-50? One person says yes, the other person says no. Okay, so what do you believe was the arrangement? And what do you believe should be the arrangement? This is where it's important to practice negotiation skills. You do practice negotiation skills by asking questions. What do you think it is? Now, if they say, well, I think I should get 100% and you should get nothing, now someone's being unreasonable. There's irrationality going on. You may not be able to have a cogent conversation that leads to a rational, reasonable, logical conclusion. Because if they're being completely illogical and they're not willing to meet anywhere in the middle, now you have an entirely different situation. And I will say in this person's case that she probably escalated it using the sarcasm, using the hurtful words that may have had a long-lasting impact, because it is very difficult to come back when you hurt someone at the deepest level. Because if you know how to strike at someone at a deep level, that's hard to forget. We can forget 1,000 nice things people say to us, but that one bad thing that one person said to us, very hard to forget. And the deeper the strike, the more it hurts. And the more it hurts, the harder it is to forget and move on. So maybe at this point, an apology is necessary. I'm not saying that this person should or shouldn't, but I am saying if it's important enough, then an apology is a drop in the ocean. It is insignificant in the grand scheme of things. If the grand scheme of things is to enjoy life and be with family, then who cares if you're apologizing about something that you really didn't want to apologize for? Because what do you get as your reward? Is fighting for the principle of something so important that you're willing to never see your grandchild again. So in this person's case, she may want to apologize, but remember to apologize for the truths. Apologize for what's true to you. And hopefully they'll hear it. Hopefully they'll hear it, and I want you to mean it. I want you to mean the apology. If you really hurt their feelings by saying things that you know hit them at a very deep level, then hopefully you do mean it. You may still be upset about the deal, the arrangement, and the disagreements there, but hopefully you do mean that you didn't mean to be mean. A lot of uses for the word mean there, but hopefully you didn't mean to be mean. But if you did mean to be mean, maybe it's important that you do apologize for it. Because when you still want love and connection in a relationship, sometimes you have to make compromises, sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the bigger picture. So I hope I was able to convey the idea that honoring yourself while honoring someone else is a lot different than trying to make them feel bad and call them names and be sarcastic. All of that is outward energy. I am pushing at you. I am trying to make you feel bad. I'm trying to make you feel guilty. I'm trying to highlight your life's mistakes. I'm trying to say that the stuff that you've done in your life, you've failed before, so why is this any different? I'm really hitting you at some core issues in your life, and I'm highlighting them and making sure that you know that you are bad or hurtful. I'm making sure you know all of this stuff about yourself so that you'll feel bad about yourself, which is definitely emotionally abusive. And that means because you have this inside of you, she said in the email that she also has done it with her other child, that means you have some coping mechanisms that need to be worked on. You know, in my Healed Being program for the emotional abuser that wants to change, I talk about coping mechanisms and how poorly developed coping mechanisms, when you're a child, you try to get through situations so that you'll survive and be comfortable, and you know, it's from a child's perspective. You just don't know what's going to happen. So you figure out how to get through these situations from a child's mind, and you develop these coping mechanisms. A good example of a coping mechanism is a child that stuffs all his emotions in. He stuffs them all down. He swallows them all because he knows if he shows them that he'll get smacked or yelled at, and he doesn't want that, so he stuffs them all down. That's a coping mechanism that probably protects him or her or whoever. And when that coping mechanism continues throughout the teenage years and into their adult relationships, they find that they're often destroying those relationships in one way or another, at least the dysfunctional coping mechanisms. They destroy relationships because they worked as a child, but they don't work as an adult because adult relationships work differently. You don't want to stuff everything down in an adult relationship because it comes out later in destructive ways. Passive aggressive behavior, lashing out, breaking things, smashing things, anger issues. So you have these coping mechanisms that you carry around that if they're not as healthy as they could be, you have to work on those things. And this is where emotional abuse comes from. At least a lot of it comes from the inability to cope well and to cope at a functional and healthy level. Instead of stuffing all those emotions down, when you get angry, you might be able to express it instead. I used to stuff this down, and when I do, it comes out in destructive ways later. So now I'm going to express myself. I'm going to say, hey, look, that makes me angry. What you're doing right now makes me angry. Let's talk about this. It might not be that smooth, but at least it's not being stuffed down. You don't want to swallow this or repress it. Suppressing your thoughts and repressing emotions has always led to depression in my life, has always led to depression. So we don't want that to happen. This is why I'm so expressive. This is why I come on the air and I talk about stuff, or I talk about stuff in my real life with my girlfriend or my mom or anyone that I care about, anyone that I want to be a part of my life. I'll express this stuff. And it's hard. These are the hard truths that I'm talking about. These are the hard truths that risk losing the relationship. And that's a lot different than honoring yourself while honoring someone else. It's not necessarily looking at a loss of a relationship. It's standing your ground, saying what you believe to be true, and honoring yourself in that way, which is keeping your power but not taking theirs away. I believe in the end, both people should have their power. And you may not ever agree. And there may be hard feelings. But how far are you willing to go, and how hard will you make those feelings if you become emotionally harmful to them by making them feel bad, being sarcastic, calling them names, insulting them? All that stuff really takes a toll. So I think I hit every aspect of this. Maybe there's more to talk about. Maybe it'll come to me on the next episode and I'll mention some more, but I really think that it's important to look at the big picture. Overall, what's the big picture? And is it worth maybe not showing up as 100% honoring yourself? And is it worth eating some crow? It's an expression, just eating some crow, which means in some sense letting go of your attachment to being right for the greater good. And this might be the greater good. She might want to apologize for the greater good. And that requires being very humble, very vulnerable. You could apologize and they could say, yes, we are right and you're wrong. And why didn't you say that at first? And you guys are such jerks. And it could happen. That's why apologies are a scary thing sometimes, because we are putting our heart out there to be crushed or nurtured, or at least showing ourselves with a very thin skin, knowing that they could hurt us. That's a very difficult place to be, apologizing. It's a very scary place to be, but it can often lead to the best outcomes. So this may be something that you write off as a loss, the financial aspect of it, but the emotional aspect, the family aspect, that's something that you want to gain, it sounds like, from your message. You want to gain that back. So that's a direction that you could try. And I hope I was able to answer your question regarding the differences between standing up for yourself, honoring yourself, and being emotionally abusive towards someone else. Man, I feel like I talked a lot. Sorry about that, but I hope this has been helpful for anyone going through this. And it's really good to connect with you today. Thanks for writing that, and thanks for joining me for another episode of The Overwhelmed Brain. We'll be right back with my thank yous and my goodbyes right after this. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Overwhelmed Brain. I want to thank our sponsors today, Best Fiends. Go to Google Play or the Apple App Store and download Best Fiends free today. I also want to remind you of BetterHelp. Go to betterhelp.com/brain and get 10% off your first month. I also want to thank our financial backers. These are the patrons of the week: Somaya, Julie, Daisy, Brad, Monica. Monica rejoined. Good to see you again, Monica. Thank you so much for your support. Holly, Nathan, Jessica, Jamie, and Christelle. Really good to see all of you. Thank you for your support. And Tina came out of the woodwork and donated and said, I can't be a regular member, but I wanted to give you a little something. Been listening to you for years, and I really think you do wonderful work. Tina, that's very generous. I mean, to take the time, energy, and money to give anything is very meaningful to me. Thank you so much, Tina, and everyone that financially supports this show. Very grateful for you. It warms my heart. And if you find value in the show and you want to give back, you can head over to moretob.com. And if you need my other podcast called Love and Abuse over at loveandabuse.com, that means that you are probably dealing with a difficult relationship and you just want to know how to navigate it. Some relationships are difficult. Heck, we talked about one today. We talked about a couple. And when those relationships are difficult, who has the power? Who is taking away your power? Or are you able to keep your power and they're able to keep theirs, and you can have civil conversations or heated conversations, but they stay civil? If you can't, maybe something else is going on that you need to be able to figure out how to work with it and how to work with them, how to deal with it. Head over to loveandabuse.com if you have a relationship like that. And if you know that you're the difficult one in the relationship and you want to change that about yourself, head over to healedbeing.com. That's where I help people who do emotionally abusive behavior change. Finally, thanks to Kevin McLeod of Incompetech.com for some of the music transitions in The Overwhelmed Brain. And I'm just going to read you a quick message to close the show. This person wrote, just to let you know that your podcast really helped me understand, actually really helped me understand what was going on in my relationship. And once I understood that it was emotional abuse, the podcast gave me strategies to try, and then when they failed, helped me get enough confidence to eventually leave the relationship. I'm feeling much happier and freer now that I've left her 3 months ago. I'm still listening as you have such great ways of teaching how a good relationship should look, and I think I'll be able to use this in my next relationship to make it a good one. All right, well, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry that you had to end the relationship, and I'm really happy that by ending the relationship, you opened up the path to continue working on yourself and get a better relationship, or at least show up as the person that can create the best relationship that you know how to create. I read this message because a lot of people, they hear tools and advice and steps to empowerment that sometimes does lead them away from people in their life, their romantic relationships, their family. I'll admit, sometimes when you are empowered, when you have better tools and better coping mechanisms, and you start honoring yourself and you start standing up for yourself, you might lose a relationship that you might think is important. I have lost relationships in my life for standing up for myself. Relationships that I did not want to lose. That meant that I had to make a choice. I had to make a choice knowing that there is the possibility of losing something that I didn't want to lose. But what ends up happening often, I'm not going to say 100%, but most of the time, this is what I see. When someone honors themselves and takes the path that they want to take, the person that supports that path, usually those relationships last. Those are the kinds of relationships that last the longest. Is that when you honor yourself and you have someone in your life that honors you honoring yourself, that's the kind of relationship that will usually last. And vice versa. When you honor somebody honoring themselves, you're telling them that, hey, you know what? Even though I might not agree with every decision you make, I support your ability to make those choices. And I won't create resistance in your life. I won't show you that you're wrong for making those choices. I may tell you that I disagree with them, but I still support the choices you make. Those are the kinds of relationships that last. And when I hear somebody write something like this, where they left their relationship, they got a divorce, maybe because of something they heard in this show or something they learned, some empowerment tool, something that made them think differently, I like to think that they came to that decision because the choices they were making in their life weren't being supported by other people. That doesn't mean that those other people are bad or wrong. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does. But what it does mean is that they may be in a relationship where they're never supported. Maybe they're in a relationship where they are only to support the other person, but the other person doesn't want to support back. So one person supports the other person's path to happiness, but the other person doesn't support that person's path to happiness. So you have a mismatch. I believe that when you make decisions that somebody else supports and they make decisions that you support, that you end up wanting to be together anyway, and you want to make little compromises and even sacrifices because you so support each other and you love each other and you want each other to be happy. So what ends up happening is, even though somebody might make a decision that you disagree with and you think it's going to take them on a path away from you, what ends up happening typically is, because you support that, they're going to feel it. They're going to value that support so much, and they're going to value the person that supports them, that they don't necessarily want to be away from them. I mean, sometimes it happens, but like I said, the majority of the time, they're going to want to be closer to the people that support them the most. I believe this is how a good relationship, a healthy relationship works. I support you on the path that you want to take. They support me on the path that I want to take. And because of that, I want to be with that person more. So even if my girlfriend says, look, I want to move to Greece without you, I want to live there by myself, it would be painful. It would be very hard. And because she didn't want me there, it would be the right thing to do for me to say, look, I don't want you to go, but if that's what you really want, I support that. I don't want it to happen, but I support you making that choice. Do you think that she's going to think, good, fine, I'm glad he's letting me go? What a jerk. She's not going to think that at all. She's going to think, wow, that's amazing. I just told you that I want to be somewhere without you, and you said, okay, I support that. I didn't expect that. So maybe I'll reconsider going. I know I'm outlining a utopian scenario. It may or may not happen that way, but let's just say that she decided to go anyway. Maybe it's something, her life's calling, some big purpose. So she says, well, thank you so much. I can't believe you support that. And I might say, well, I'm still hurt. I don't want you to go, but I don't want to prevent you from going either. I mean, if this is something that's calling to you, then I support that. She's going to have a really good feeling about that. She's going to love that I am supporting her. She's going to have probably the best feeling that I could hope for about me. And that is probably the closest you can get to really loving someone, is supporting them on a path that you may disagree with. And it is also, in my opinion, a path that might lead to what you really want to happen, which is them not leaving. In my case, I'd be like, I don't want you to leave, but I support it. And if she does leave, she's going to have a good feeling about me. And if she comes back, she's going to want to be with me. I mean, I'm really creating this fantasy scenario, but I'm trying to give you an example of how this might work and why it's important to support people even when you disagree with them. Unless it's, like I've said before, unless it's life and death and you really want to make sure that they don't put themselves in harm's way. But for the most part, we typically disagree with people because of how it makes us feel. I don't want her to go because I'll feel alone. I'll feel sad. And because I don't want that, I don't want to support her path. I don't want to support her decision to do that. And so that's I hate to say it, a selfish way to think. It is selfish. And I'm not saying I have not been selfish. I've been selfish in the past. I don't want that to happen, so don't do it. But if I were to be the closest I can get to unconditional love, that's how I would show it. is that somebody is doing something that I don't really want them to do, but I know it would make them happy. That's what I consider loving, and that's what they consider loving, in my opinion. It's my belief. It's my philosophy. I like to show love that way, and I believe that it comes back to me when I show it that way. And when they don't come back to me, they won't have this awful picture that I was some jerk. And I'm not doing it because I'm trying to keep that awful picture out of their mind. I'm actually trying to be genuinely supportive. And that's the important part. This isn't a manipulation. This isn't trying to trick them into staying. This is because she could actually leave. And I want to show her that my support for her is about her happiness and not my fears. My support for you is about your happiness. So if this is what you need to do, then by all means, do it. That's what I want. I'll drive you to the airport. I'll give you some spending money. I'll do whatever you need as long as you're happy. I want to make sure that you feel good about what you're doing. That goes a long way with anyone in your life. And it has to be genuine. It has to be real. Because what if they do go and do something that you disagree with? Are you suddenly going to reverse your decision and say, no, I don't want you to go. Don't do this. You're destroying our family. You're doing something bad, and I don't want you to do it. Your truth will come out when you don't get what you want. This is why it's important to work on being more, in my opinion, unconditionally loving. And I don't believe unconditional love is attainable unless it's a kid. If it's your kid, there's a lot of unconditional love there. But when it's another person, your family member, romantic, friend, if it's somebody else, you do your best. You do your best to be unconditionally loving, which is supporting the path they want to take. And the reason I talk about all that is because of this letter this person wrote saying that, I left my relationship. I tried the strategies and they failed, so I didn't feel supported. I'm putting words in his mouth now, but I'm sure he didn't feel supported because he tried. When one person's trying and the other person's not, that's not a dual support system for a relationship. It's not working. It's not a way to work on things together. It is a I'm right, you're wrong scenario, so fix yourself. That usually accompanies emotionally abusive relationships. The I'm right, you're wrong dynamic. If I'm right and you're wrong, then I can do no wrong and everything you do is wrong. That is so unbalanced. That is not a I support you, you support me situation. That is not a relationship. It stops being a relationship when somebody says, you need to fix everything. I have no responsibility in this relationship. That's just not a relationship anymore. That is about control and power and making sure the other person never has power and is always submissive and always doing what you want them to do or they want you to do. You don't want that kind of situation. So it could be what this person dealt with, but I don't know. But I'm so glad they're on a better path. And I want to make sure that you're always on a better path, or at least taking the steps to go in the right direction for you, the direction that works for you, the direction that is the most mentally healthy, the most emotionally positive, so that you get into a better space inside yourself and you're able to bring the best version of yourself into the world. I think that's a great way to show up, is when you can bring the best version of yourself into the world. And if you're having trouble doing that, just keep listening, keep coming back, and remember to always keep an open mind so that you can step into your power. That's how you create the life you want. Always take steps to grow and evolve. You are powerful beyond measure. And above all, and this is something I absolutely know to be true about you, you are amazing.